welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of the IceBergs Hockey Podcast. This is our third episode ever, which I'm honestly so happy to be back. We took a bit of a break. It's been about 10 days or so since we filmed our last two, but we're super happy to be back. And today's episode will be about sort of the conference finals and wrapping up, I guess, hockey for the year is kind of where we're at, which I was sitting at work today and I honestly got sad about it. But I'm Joey Rittenberg, for those of you who are new here.
I'm Jared Rodenberg, and we're on the beginning of the end, which is absolutely crazy. I can't believe it. But what a season it's been. It's been such a good NHL season. I was thinking about it earlier. I'm like, when you look at what's kind of happened, what's gone down, I can't think of anything better. You have all four teams that have made the conference finals are teams that deserve to make the conference finals. You could make a legit argument for all four of the teams remaining to win the Stanley Cup. There's no gimme team. There's no throwaway team. Every team that's made the conference finals this year deserves to make the conference finals, and I just can't wait to see what happens the rest of the way.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. And we said that today we wanted to just jump right into it, just to get into all the exciting stuff we have planned. And I guess the first thing that I wanted to discuss, and all the past 2 weeks, it's been really weighing on me, and my dreams are a little crushed, but Vancouver unfortunately was eliminated by Edmonton. I believe it was 2 nights ago now. So they were eliminated, obviously, in 7 games. They really tried until the last second, or waited until the last second, to have some form of an explosive
They made
offense.
it close. They actually made me
yeah.
believe, is this the team of destiny? Are they actually going to pull it off? They got within 1 goal, and then the dreams were crushed in Vancouver once again.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I'll still stand by my prediction, but I see now that the power of friendship can carry you to a conference final or a cup final.
The thing is, I still believe it could have. It could have beaten Vancouver. The thing is, it could have beaten Edmonton, rather. The issue is Edmonton just stepped up when their backs were against the line. Edmonton was not playing a great series, which led them to be down 3-2 in the series. If Edmonton continued playing the way they were playing, and if Vancouver continued playing the way they were playing, especially with getting Brock Besser to stay healthy, and obviously we wish the best for him and hoping that he's okay. He has a blood clot issue. But if all of that didn't happen, there's a reasonable argument that they could have vibed their way into the conference finals. My issue is what they were going to do when they got there, but unfortunately we don't even need to ask that question anymore because they didn't even beat Edmonton.
And I guess that's kind of going to segue us into the next point that we sort of wanted to talk about. So the first thing is that we both correctly picked 3 out of the 4.
We both had 3 of the 4.
Yeah, except you went 4 for 4, didn't you?
No, we were in the conference. Our predictions for who was going to win the second round, we were identical. We all had Florida, we all had New York, we all had Dallas, and we all had Vancouver. We had 4 for 4 the same picks. So we're currently 3 for 4.
You didn't take Edmonton. Okay,
I had Vancouver. The only difference is what happened once we got to the conference finals. I had Dallas beating Vancouver in 5. You had Vancouver upsetting Dallas and then going on to win the Stanley Cup, which, I mean, unfortunately, that one's out of the question.
So anyways, we perfectly picked one of the series, which is kind of cool, considering that things had really had just been kickstarted for that round. So, I mean, hats off to us, but anyways,
we did something right.
Yeah, we did something right.
I think the Edmonton Oilers, as much as they do have their flaws, they are not without their flaws one bit. I still think the fact that they have the speed advantage, we've seen it all playoffs long, that speed is a killer come playoff time. Speed absolutely kills. I think the prime example of that would be the Colorado-Winnipeg series in the first round. I don't think that's going to happen in this case, but I do think the Edmonton Oilers' speed is going to be able to take out at least 2 games from the Dallas Stars. I think Dallas, if you break it down in terms of a roster comparison, the Dallas Stars are deeper offensively, but not better than the top 6. I think the Dallas Stars are better defensively, but surprisingly, the one area where the Edmonton Oilers have actually been solid is their defensive ability. I will add that I don't think they're as battle-tested as the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars, we kind of talked about it last week when we were talking about the road to the conference finals. the Dallas Stars being in that Central Division had to take out the reigning Stanley Cup champions in the Vegas Golden Knights, and then had to take out the 2022 Stanley Cup champions in Colorado Avalanche. I would argue that the Dallas Stars are way more battle-tested than the Edmonton Oilers, having to go through LA and Vancouver. But with that being said, you could only judge how they did against the opponents they were forced to go up against. And in those matchups with LA and with Vancouver, the Edmonton Oilers did actually play a really good defensive series in both series, especially when their backs were against the line and backs were on the line, went down 3-2 in the series. Like, they did really step up their ability under pressure. So Dallas is definitely better defensively, but I don't think it's as arms and legs as I probably would have said heading into the playoffs. But in the end, it's just the deeper team. You need to be a deep team in order to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I just think Dallas is the deepest team remaining in the entire NHL. I'm going to go Dallas in 6. I think Dallas is better in net. Dallas is better defensively, and Dallas is better in terms of offensive depth. But I don't think the Oilers are as far as behind as to say it's going to be a sweep. I still think it's going to be Dallas in 6, though.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I had to shift my whole bracket, obviously, because mine kind of got blown up. But yeah, no, those are all good arguments. I'm in agreement with you. I do think Dallas could be a potential cup winner for this year. Like,
Potential. I think they're doing it. I really do think they're doing it.
And with that, we're going to move on to the East, where we have the Rangers and the Panthers facing off against each other actually in about 10 minutes. And I'm probably gonna have the game on just on the side, just in case anything like wild or to happen. We could discuss it. But anyways, so we have that kicking it off at Madison Square Garden in New York tonight. Really exciting. Gonna be a super exciting series, very physical. Like, I feel like that's been kind of like the major topic of conversation since both teams were won and moved on. And I think the big thing for me that I've kind of looked at, especially going into this game one, is like there have been like injuries but for these two teams, but I feel like it's kind of come to a point where like those aren't going to be the make or break. Like, yeah, you're missing these guys on the bench. And that's why I said for morale, I didn't say like necessarily for playing.
Totally valid.
You know what I mean? Like, but anyways, I think that Florida's still going to take the series, in my opinion. I think it'll go the distance. I do. Just because of the nature of these two teams, and like we've seen them have to battle for it so far this playoffs, but not even that. I think that both teams want it so badly, like we talked about, and both are very like big physical presences on the ice. But on top of that, they both are like offensive weapons. Like, both teams are in their respective conferences, or sorry, divisions, and I'd say conferences. I'll extend out to that. I might be going out on a limb saying this, but I think that they're two of the most physical teams in the league. Like,
they're probably the two most physical teams remaining out of the entire conference finals.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be a dog eat dog. Like, it's going to be, I'm excited.
I can't wait for this series. It's going to be a really interesting series. I could see this one going a lot more the distance than the Edmonton Oilers versus Dallas Stars series. Just because, like we talked about before with the Dallas Stars and Edmonton Oilers, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of skill in that series. But the team that wins it, it's based on more of the factors like offensive depth and overall skill and who's going to step up. With the Florida Panthers, New York Rangers, it's going to be a contest of who doesn't kill the other team. Like, if you ain't killing your opponent, you ain't trying, because it's going to be absolute war. It's going to be a total battle in this series. And I really do believe that, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, I said it earlier on the last episode, I was actually going to ask to start off the saga about the New York Rangers, Florida Panthers, if any of our predictions have changed. Like, Joey, have you changed your prediction at all? Because I know last time you had Florida winning in 7.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah, you're sticking with that. So I'm sticking with my pick as well. If you remember from last episode, or if you're new here, I did the New York Rangers winning in 7. So this is one that me and Joey are actually in a little bit of disagreement on. But I just think it's going to be an absolute war. And even though Florida maybe does have the advantage in terms of more goons, I just think the overall depth that the New York Rangers have, but as well as the fact that they have some bark, they also have some bite, especially a guy like Matt Rempe is going to be a total animal in this series. I think this is the series that Rempe is getting that call. I mean, this is a series he was made for. He is getting the call, especially for a series like this.
You mean like, okay, yes, I get what you mean.
He was molded in a lab for a series like this against a team like the Florida Panthers. Like, this is where a guy like him is going to totally thrive. And I just think he's going to be such a factor there for a team like the New York Rangers that I would argue are a little bit outclassed in terms of the physicality aspect of the ice. But the
Yeah.
fact that the New York Rangers have, I'd say, an overall depth advantage, plus they have one of the biggest animals in the series in a guy like Matt Rempe, I just think it complements each other so well to the point that, yes, it's going to go the distance. If you remember from last week, I was kind of in a debate with myself about whether I was going to have the Rangers in 6 or 7. I did ultimately decide I was going to give the Florida Panthers the credit they deserve and give it a 7-game series. But I still think at the end of the day, the Rangers are just a lot deeper overall. I like the Rangers in net a lot more, and that's not to say that Sergei Bobrovsky is a bad goalie by any means, but he is not Igor Shesterkin. Igor Shesterkin's for sure the best goalie still remaining in these Stanley Cup playoffs, and I really do believe that it's the New York Rangers series to lose. I think they're the favorite for a reason. And even though the Florida Panthers playing style is going to give them a hard time, again, I still have the Florida Panthers pushing the Rangers to Madison Square Garden and pushing them to that final 7th game. I just think at the end of the day, it's going to be the New York Rangers moving on to take on the Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup Finals, which isn't a prediction I had all season long. In the preseason, if you remember, I mentioned this last episode. I did have a Carolina versus Dallas Stars preseason prediction, but as soon as the All-Star break rolled around, I switched tunes on that, and I had the New York Rangers versus Dallas Stars. I even threw a little bit of money on that. And right now it's looking pretty damn good. I have a chance to turn $5 into $180 if that ends up being the Stanley Cup Finals. And I'm just feeling really good about that pick.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, the last time that Florida and I did a whole post today, that was like so fun.
It
I don't
looks
know.
so sick. It really
was
did look
cool.
so cool.
It was fun. I got a lot of like artistic freedom with it, so it was cool. But anyways, so I this morning when I was at work at TSN, I did a whole breakdown that basically I had to do like an hour of research, but basically it's been 27 years since Florida and New York have played against each other in a playoff series, period. Like
Which is wild. Like, that's so wild.
it's been almost 3 decades. So in my mind, it's like not only do these 3 teams like have they been through stuff in like we were talking about last week, like in the last 10 years where New York went out early or Florida making it to the finals, like they not only have that, but they also have 27 years of waiting to play each other again. The last time they played each other, Wayne Gretzky was probably one of the MVPs of that series.
Six goals in 5 games. I read the stat. I took a look at the stat.
And on the team was Mark Messier as well. So like you can imagine it was probably a fantastic series. The
100%.
New York Rangers won in 5 games. So they basically went after Florida won the first game, they just swept them the rest of the way. Which is crazy, but I don't know. I thought it was really cool to think about how not only is there the buildup of the last 10 years, but you could argue almost the last 30. So just
even kind of to add on to that point, like, yes, there's the hatred that's been built up over 27 years of these two teams wanting to play each other. But even these teams, both, I would argue, have something to prove. The New York Rangers haven't won the Stanley Cup in 30 years. It was 1994 is the last time they won the Stanley Cup. The Florida Panthers have not won a Stanley Cup in their entire existence.
They're the only team that's still in that hasn't won one.
Yep, they have not won a Stanley Cup. New York Rangers haven't won in 30 years. Like, there is a lot for both of these teams trying to prove something. And especially with the Florida Panthers, the fact that they have gone to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 times in their existence. And both times, if I'm not mistaken, they were swept against the Colorado Avalanche, I believe. And I know for sure, obviously, a bit more recent memory, against the Vegas Golden Knights last year, they got out in 5 games. Like, the Florida Panthers have something to prove in terms of their entire history. The New York Rangers got out in 5 in that series against the LA Kings in 2014 and haven't made it back to the Stanley Cup Finals since then. Like, there is a lot of storylines beyond the actual team comparisons that I'm so excited to take a look at when this series kicks off. It's gonna be a really fun one.
Yeah, so that was just something kind of cool that, like, this morning when I sat down at my desk, I was like, okay, so this game is tonight. What sort of storyline can I come up with? And it was actually there ended up being some like really relevant information.
I was gonna ask you about that. Was it something like, did he walk into the office and like talk to people about thinking of creative idea, or did he just like get to your desk and go, okay, I want to think of a creative idea, like creative juices were flowing?
I sat down. I gave I was gonna say my buddy, but I guess like I don't know how to say it, like friend. He works with us. His name's Jeff. He's the guy. He's the sign guy.
The man. Jeff's the man. Jeff's
Jeff
dude
Jeff
sports
Hall.
sign. Due to the sports side.
due to the sports sign. So, anyways, I sat down and I started like shooting the shit with him. I was just trying to bounce some ideas off him. There were a couple that just like didn't land. And I like this is why I like Jeff, because he'll just be like, that doesn't really make sense, or that doesn't really have a storyline. I'll be like, okay, cool. Find
Oh,
another
yeah.
angle. So I found this angle and it was cool. And then he helped me brainstorm some of the facts and stuff. But yeah, it was awesome. Anyway, so just to continue, out of the final four, and this could even be in asterisks because it only applies to one of us, because I feel like yours maybe didn't change. But out of the final four, who is your updated Conn Smythe trophy winner? And I'm assuming, and I have here that Jared still has Ottinger.
I've had Ottinger not just since the start of the playoffs. It's not just a playoff thing. I have Ottinger. I'm gonna keep bringing this up because I'm actually like, usually when I make these preseason predictions, they do not do as good as they've done this year. Like, I'm actually really impressed with how good that initial bracket I made it is kind of holding up still. But I had Jake Ottinger as my playoff MVP, and the reason I kind of rationalized that is, okay, with the way the Dallas Stars are built, yes, obviously Wyatt Johnston's having a really good offensive season, but they're never going to win off of one superstar offensively. They're never going to win off of a superstar defensively, even though Miro Heiskanen is the only guy you can kind of make an argument for. It's going to have to be goaltending if they're going to win the Stanley Cup. And I think they are going to win the Stanley Cup.
It takes a village.
100% it takes a village. And yes, it is a factor. Like, if Miro Heiskanen ends up finishing up the Stanley Cup playoffs as the leader in Dallas Stars point scoring, you could definitely make an argument there for him being like the only guy that could rival Ottinger. But Ottinger's having a really good season. Like, even playoff wise, he's been one of the best goalies still remaining. He's a 2.09 save percentage or rather goals against average as of now, a 918 save percentage right now. He's been really damn good in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The only goalie that has better stats than him currently, and it's like by a smidge, it's just barely, is Igor Shesterkin. But I would say Jake Ottinger is the second best goalie, at least is playing like the second best goalie still remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He might be, in terms of like overall career, a bit worse than Sergei Bobrovsky. But, you go with who's hot right now, and Jake Ottinger is really hot right now. I'm still going with him as my Conn Smythe trophy winner. And one thing we kind of skipped over, I've given my explanation for it in the last episode, so I'm not going to repeat it now. But I think the New York Rangers are going to be beaten by my Dallas Stars, but my Cup winner, in 6 games. That's my Stanley Cup prediction. My Stanley Cup Finals, like, it's going to be the Dallas Stars winning the Cup in 6, and I have Jake Ottinger winning the Conn Smythe trophy. But Joey, I'm curious to hear from you, because you had Florida Panthers versus Vancouver Canucks, meaning I know you have the Dallas Stars now beating the Edmonton Oilers, and you have a Dallas Stars versus Florida Panthers matchup, but I actually don't know what your Stanley Cup final pick is. I don't know what your Stanley Cup champion pick is. So give me all of that. Give me who's winning the series, rationalize it a little bit, and then I want to hear your Conn Smythe trophy winner.
So I had JT Miller or Brock Boeser, and then I had Shelovs if they like. It could, like, honestly,
if he ended up being the story,
if they had moved on, and if they had somehow in some way beat Dallas, he would have been a shoo-in for it. If they had made it to the finals and won easily, if Demko hadn't come back,
I would say easily, except the NHL doesn't tend to do stuff like that. Like, I feel like there's been so many like storylines like that. Like,
have you ever heard of a third string goalie carrying a team? Like, I feel like
Adin Hill was a 4th string goalie last year.
Okay, yes.
Adin Hill. And when Jordan Binnington won the Stanley Cup, like, he was way down the depth chart. He was this like minor league goalie that stepped up. So I remember in 2019, I really thought it was Jordan Binnington's Conn Smythe trophy to lose, and they ended up going with the point scoring leader. So I always wish that the NHL did more storyline things, even in 2016 rather. Like, that was Phil Kessel's award. Phil Kessel should have won the Conn Smythe trophy. Was it 2016 or 2017? What was the year he was like the leading point scorer? I think it was the first one.
Wasn't it the first time they won?
I'm pretty sure. But again, it was a shoo-in. Phil Kessel ended up leading that team in points for every single storyline reason. Like, how cool is that?
I wonder how they do it. Maybe they
go with the big name. Like, for example, like, Alex Ovechkin wasn't leading the Capitals in scoring when they won. Kuznetsov was. But Ov is the star, and it ends up coming down to like a resume thing. It ends up being, when you're like talking about Hall of Fame nomination, it ends up being kind of a tiebreaker. So if it's someone that's like going to be a Hall of Famer, someone who's a superstar, they usually are more likely to give it to the big name, the superstar. Like Sidney Crosby, again, won it twice in a row. But I don't think he was the leading point getter in either of those cups in 2016 and 2017. they usually go with the story. And for example, with last year, like Aiden Hill probably could have won as well. He could have made a good argument because he was this fourth string guy that ended up winning the Stanley Cup with them. But they ended up going with, I don't even think he was the point leader. I want to say maybe he was the goal scoring leader. I don't remember exactly what Jonathan Marchessault had. I think he was like tied in points with Jack Eichel, but whatever it was, they usually just go, okay, you're a points leader, so you'll get it. Or there's usually kind of a weird way they do it. It usually isn't as fun as giving it to a guy like Archer Seeloff, but it would have been an amazing story. I wish that's what ended up happening.
But like, see here, I agree. I think Dallas wins the cup. Like I'm in agreement with that. The only thing is too, and the reason I would even support that argument further is that Florida is going to come out of their series seriously banged up, which is what I said before. They're going to like be so regardless, like I think that because not that there's necessarily a deadline, but because like there's less teams that have to finish, so they have to wait less time to start the rounds or whatever, like or to start the finals at least. In my opinion, I think that Florida will be a lot more hurt. And as we said, like I don't need to go through it again, but Dallas has the depth, I think, in comparison. The only thing, like Dallas has speed. I think Florida will just be too tired by then to produce the same speed they were producing in rounds 1 and 2, in my opinion.
If Dallas does end up winning the Stanley Cup with, honestly, no matter who they end up playing, whether it's the Rangers or the Edmonton Oilers, whether it's the Rangers or the Florida Panthers is what I meant to say. There's a genuine argument there that this might be one of the hardest roads to a Stanley Cup that I've ever seen. Like they have to take out the reigning Cup champions in the first round of the Vegas Golden Knights. Then they have to take out the 2022 Stanley Cup champions in the Colorado Avalanche. Then they have to take out Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, and Evan Bouchard, all of which are playing like absolute animals right now in the playoffs. And then to add insult to injury, like it gets no easier when you have to take out, I don't care whether like spin a dice, spin a wheel, I don't care who it is, if it's the Florida Panthers or the New York Rangers, like you are not getting out of that series without being seriously hurt and seriously banged up. But if the Dallas Stars are able to ride through all of that, like there is no doubt or debate about if they're a legit Stanley Cup champion, if they earned their Stanley Cup. Like this might be one of the most earned Stanley Cup that I've ever seen. If they get through all of that and still come out the other way, shining in green with that Stanley Cup.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say Dallas in 5.
Interesting.
Dallas in 5 because of the whole injury. I really do think that this Florida New York series is going to be crazy. I don't think the world's ready for it. I think Matt Rempe is ready for it, but I don't think the world is ready for it.
Yes, no, it's going to be totally crazy. What I was going to say is this might be a hot take. I actually think, and as a guy that picked the Dallas Stars to win the cup all year long, I think Florida would be a harder matchup for them personally. Like, I have Dallas beating the Rangers in 6. I think if it ends up being Florida that beats the Rangers, that would probably go 7 in my opinion. I still agree with you that Dallas would win it, but again, speed is such a killer come playoff time, and Florida's one of those teams that it doesn't matter how banged up they are, it doesn't matter how hurt they are, they play similar to almost like what we argued with Boston, where it doesn't matter who they have on paper. They have this like ideology. They have this playing style. The way Paul Maurice works them, like they will always outspeed you. The way they rally the puck, they are so strong on the puck. So I'm not saying the Dallas Stars wouldn't beat either. I just really do believe they would. But I think Florida might be a harder series. So having in 5 is a little bit discrediting Florida, in my opinion.
Five or fine. I'll say 5 or 6, but I think Dallas is going to be rolling.
I do as well. I really think they are. It's just Florida is so good too. So I think it's going to be, in my opinion, I think it will just, Florida being beaten by New York. I think it'll be Dallas beating the Rangers. But if it does end up being Florida, that is going to be such a war of a series as well. That even might be more of a hard series for the Dallas Stars to win. You might even be able to make the case that, like, if you want to talk about their hard road to winning a Stanley Cup, like, if it's the Rangers, that's like an impossible task to win that Stanley Cup, going through Vegas, Colorado, Edmonton, and the Rangers. If you want to add the Florida Panthers as that final team in the Stanley Cup Finals, like, you're doing that on nightmare difficulty. You're winning a Stanley Cup actually on the most impossible settings there is. because not only do you have all of the playing style things I mentioned with the Florida Panthers, but even the fact that Florida got beaten in the Stanley Cup Finals last season, meaning they are coming into that Stanley Cup Finals with the most fire and fury that probably the Dallas Stars have ever seen on this road to the Stanley Cup. And that includes them beating a team that won the Stanley Cup last year. Like, it's going to be a war no matter who they play. I am so excited for this Final Four. As much as I'm usually a guy that I love a good underdog story. I usually, when I argue like why I like the NHL so much better than the NBA, is I usually am like, I like the fact that anyone could win. It's unpredictable. But this is a year where I'm kind of at that point where, yes, if there was a crazy underdog, I would get behind that story and find it really cool. But the fact that you could genuinely make a case that the best team in every single division went to the conference finals, like, I am so excited because it's genuinely going to be a test of the best team is going to be the Stanley Cup champion. And I've always argued, and I've actually gotten into like heated debates with people, my roommate included, that the best team to win, the team that wins the Stanley Cup is not always like automatically the best team in the NHL.
No,
there are things like they were the grittiest team and they were stuff like that. Their goaltending stepped up, their depth stepped up, but you are not automatically the best built team in the NHL because you won the Stanley Cup. But this year, it might actually be a rare case, except for Edmonton. Like, I think Edmonton still has enough flaws that I could say, even if they won, they kind of won despite their flaws. But if it's Florida, the Rangers, more importantly, the Rangers and Dallas. Florida, you could still say it's iffy as well. But like Dallas and the Rangers are so well built that if it ends up being a Stanley Cup Finals with those two teams, like this Stanley Cup Final, in my opinion, decides who is the best team in the NHL.
Okay, I'm also, this is my, like, I'll literally spend 1 minute. You can make a comment if you want, but I'm switching. I'm going Florida on 7.
You know Florida what? Winning this. Oh,
you know what? You know
Florida
what?
winning the Stanley Cup.
Florida winning the Stanley Cup. You know what? That's going to be the underdog, and I have tried that strategy before and failed. However, I have my arguments, and I also have my Conn Smythe.
Okay. Let's hear it.
I don't think in that case it would be a goaltending Conn Smythe. I think that the assets that they have on the bench are way more valuable, or not way more valuable necessarily, because I do think you need a goalie to win. However, I think that an offensive or defensive player would get it over a goalie in that case.
If it ends up being Dallas versus Florida, I would agree with you. Again, my argument for Jake Ottinger winning it is because he's going to have to outduel Igor Shesterkin. Like, that's a big part of my argument, which obviously it wasn't a part of my argument in the preseason. I didn't know who they were going to play. But now that we've kind of gotten close to the playoffs, and obviously I could have backtracked on that prediction if I didn't think it was still going to happen. But now that I have it being Dallas versus New York, I think it's going to be Jake Ottinger. It's going to be a goalie just because he has to take out Igor Shesterkin. But I'll agree with you. If it ends up being Dallas versus Florida Panthers, it probably changes because you're right. It's going to have to be, probably in that case, it would be Miro Heiskanen would be my pick.
Yeah, that's fair. I think in my mind, if I had to pick a Conn Smythe winner, okay, so first of all, I think I agree. I feel bad saying that the series would be done that early. I think that it's again going to be a battle. Like I think
disrespectful.
It's
downright disrespectful.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm gonna take that one back and just
sorry, Panthers fans. I may not be picking you to win the cup, but I do have your back.
And just choke on
my Bobby Lou Roberto Luongo jersey.
Oh, nice. But anyways, what I was gonna say was that, let's say in some miraculous way, Florida, it's the physicality that takes Dallas out. Like, I don't know. And their speed and we've talked about this puck movement. We know that Dallas has their strengths too, but you could argue that Florida has had that too. And you could also argue that the Atlantic Division is probably single-handedly the hardest division in hockey.
It's not even a problem. It's at this point, it's set. It is the hardest division.
I'll happily make like an argument out of that any day of the week. Like,
yeah, I don't even think it is an argument, and I think anyone that knows what they're talking about shouldn't be debating you on that. It's the hardest division in the sport. There's no question about it.
I just think, and they're former President's Trophy winners. They've made it. They made it to the finals last year. I just think, why not then? You know what I mean? Why not? And also, I think I know you have your arguments about Dallas and you've sat and thought really hard about it. And I'm sitting here just changing it, going out on a limb here. but
Because
like,
that's the playoffs. Like sometimes it is
but
a
I
gut pick.
also, it's not, this isn't even for show for the viewers. I actually was sitting here having like an aha moment, being like, wow, Florida's a really good team. Like they're really good,
They're
and they've
really good. I
waited
still don't think they're as good as the Rangers or Dallas. Like again, if I look
depth.
at the top four team, if I sorry, the four teams that are still remaining, conference finalists, if I'm gonna rate like who is the best team or who should win the Stanley Cup, I think it goes Dallas one. I think it goes New York two. I think it goes Florida three, and then I think it goes Edmonton four is my order. And I think the Florida Panthers are a really good team, and their playing style is really built for the playoffs. They are a terrifying team come playoff time, but I still think they have some flaws, not major flaws, but when you're getting to this point in the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's not like you're playing teams like Boston and Tampa anymore. Like you're playing teams like the Dallas Stars and the New York Rangers, the best teams in the NHL, and those are teams that will exploit and take advantage of whatever weakness you have. And I just think the depth scoring on both the Rangers and the Stars will be able to outscore and exploit the Florida Panthers, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a good argument. But anyways, we're gonna move on. But I just wanted to switch up
Conn
my
Smythe.
I oh, it's gonna go to Kachuk. I feel like it just like
Yeah,
can't
he's
it
the
can't
leading
it
scorer. I think that's
like
valid.
arguably I just feel like it can't not. Um like if you had asked me throughout the year who I would have picked, it probably would have been Reinhardt, but like I think that was just because of his
Yeah, he had an amazing regular season. He was
really
dominant
good.
offensively.
Was it his best?
Yeah, well, he was second place in overall league scoring, like
Yeah,
off goal scoring wise, not
yeah, so anyways, so I would argue like obviously there's been a shift because but we know that Matthew Kachuk like steps up to bat in the big moments. So I feel like it would go to him. I feel like there's no question about that.
the
Unless
craziest thing. The craziest thing with Matthew Tkachuk is I feel like at this time last year, like heading into the Eastern Conference Finals, everyone was talking about how dominant, how I mean, obviously it was fresh off. It was the first full season following the Huberdeau for Tkachuk trade, so that was
yeah,
obviously a storyline, and
there was
people
hype around that.
there was major hype
Yeah.
around him. But I feel like at this time last year, everyone was talking about how dominant Matthew Tkachuk is as a playoff performer. This year, he is the leading point getter on one of the best teams still remaining, and I feel like it's been crickets. I
I
feel like
just
no one's talking about
but
how
I
good
feel
Matthew
like there's
Tkachuk is.
been so many other I feel like this two-headed monster that Edmonton is right now, like I I still think Dallas is gonna win. I'm not 100% count like I do think Edmonton will push them. You
I
have
think I said Dallas in six. I think Edmonton steals two games.
their top guys and not even. It's like defensemen are playing really good hockey. Like there's good hockey and then there's really good hockey. And you know that if you're able to score on like on the teams that they've I guess played against, I would argue, or if you're able to generate that kind of offense from players who weren't doing it all year, like there's clearly been like a switch flipped. But anyways, all I was saying was that those guys are doing so well right now. It's actually wild. I sat
And
down at my
it's not
desk.
going to last very long because the Dallas Stars are about crush them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so let's move on to the next point of, oh, actually, I think it's over here. I have it like hidden in a window. We're gonna talk about our NHL award predictions. I always like this topic of conversation because I always wonder like the way in which things actually get decided. Like no one's in the situation room. I mean, sure, for say your heart or like your the or sorry, not Hart, Rocket Richard, like
Yeah,
the ones that
those ones are given.
actually rely on statistics and numbers, fine. But I always wonder what it's like are like how are people arguing for it? Like, is it like what we're about to do right now? Like, I don't know.
It's kind of what we're about to do right now.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the Jack Adams Coach of the Year um award. And Jared, do you wanna you could start off by talking about your pick first, and then we can go from
Okay.
there.
So I'm big on I don't like flip-flopping on my picks. And as I keep on mentioning, I will keep mentioning it until I don't hit on some of these predictions. When I made my Jack Adams prediction in the preseason, my pick, they were a surprise team. I didn't see many brackets that had this team making the Stanley Cup playoffs. I had the Nashville Predators in the preseason making the playoffs. And as a result, I kind of rationalized that Andrew Brunette, the head coach of the Nashville Predators, will end up being the Jack Adams Trophy winner. And they ended up making the Stanley Cup playoffs. So you think, okay, so obviously I'm just leaving that pick as is. But Rick Tocchet, it really is his award to lose. No one, and I mean nobody, had the Vancouver Canucks being as good as they would be this season. The other guy that's nominated is Rick Bowness of the Winnipeg Jets, and that's another team that I kind of thought about a little bit, because even though the Winnipeg Jets made it to the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, I feel like a lot of people, myself included on this one, like didn't predict them to do it again. So with the fact that a lot of people counted Winnipeg Jets out heading into this season, and they ended up finishing in the top 5 in the overall NHL like league points and league standings, there is a good argument there for Rick Bowness. There also is a valid argument there for the guy I had in the preseason, Andrew Brunette. But it really is the Vancouver Canucks were a revelation this season. So much went against them. They had so much injuries all season long. But the guy that was just steering that ship and I'd say pulling blood from a stone, it was Rick Tocchet all year long. I have Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks being named the coach of the year, and that's my Jack Adams pick.
I'm sorry, I'm just I'm just laughing because you said pulling blood from a stone, and someone said that in our meeting today.
Yeah,
And
that's why it's fresh on the mind, fresh on the dome.
yeah, and
I
then
listen to those meetings. Don't worry about it. I listen.
I know I just was like, wow, I actually know what that means now because our lovely boss
Pulling blood
actually
from a
explained
stone.
it. Okay, I mean, it's no question for me. I had this team winning it all. Rick Tocchet, like he's a great goalie. Not goalie. What am I saying? He's a great coach.
Great coach. Amazing coach.
Great coach. And I think that he has shown that you can take a team. And I don't think, I mean, this was something that I always used to talk about like a few years ago when Vegas first formed and got really good, like the team of misfits. I'm not going to say that Vancouver's a team of misfits because they have a lot of talent, but I think he took a team of people who didn't necessarily fit or who you wouldn't think would fit and was able to, with good management, I might add, with really good management and some really good pickups in the last year and a half, like adding Zadorov, adding a couple of the other guys that they have, like management, yes, but Tocchet, when you think about it, is the guy that crafts the lines, works the players, builds a team. And I think that he showed that you can take something from not necessarily nothing, but something that isn't necessarily expected to be anything and make it into what the Vancouver Canucks were this year. So I'm going with him.
I totally agree with that pick. And one thing I want to add before we move on to the next pick, or the next trophy rather, you look at the difference between Rick Tocchet's coaching strategy and the previous guy, Bruce Boudreau. Like, it's something that kind of gives me a little bit of excitement. Obviously, we're not getting into this yet later on in the podcast, but the final thing we're going to talk about when we wrap up is the fact that the Leafs just hired a new guy. And it almost reminds me of the same kind of switch. Bruce Boudreau was the nicest guy. He was a giant teddy bear. Seems like the sweetest guy ever. But at some point, he lost the room with the Vancouver Canucks. He was almost like too much of a player's coach to the point that when you don't have a guy steering the ship, when you don't have a guy that's really
crashed into they were in Titanic, if I'm being honest.
Eventually, when you don't have a guy that's really laying into you and making the team his, it becomes up to the players to almost put it upon themselves to discipline each other. And it's no secret that there was so much hostility in that dressing room last year, so many leadership issues and locker room issues with the Vancouver Canucks last season. And to almost counter something that you said, yes, I will give you, it's not like they were some kind of team of destiny in the sense that they were bad. But if you look at how they played previously in terms of like their defensive ability, especially, they were not good whatsoever defensively. And going into the season, part of the reason why I rationalized the fact that I didn't have them making the playoffs this year, the Vancouver Canucks, is because they were genuinely, like, you looked at that team, not just in terms of how they played defensively, but even on paper, like, they did not look like a good defensive core because every single player on that defensive core was downplaying in the last few years. Like, Tyler Myers used to be a pretty formidable defenseman. He was a big boy. He used to be a pretty good shutdown guy, but he has just fallen down, down, down. And so many guys on that Canucks defensive core are in the same boat where they were really never, like, playing with a great commitment to overall team defense. No one was really stepping up and shutting things down. Rick Tocchet got them to do that. And for that reason, with the way that he totally like made them flip this switch and change the way they played entirely, I think it is Rick Tocchet's award to lose, and Rick Tocchet is going to win the Jack Adams.
Absolutely. Okay, we're gonna move to the Calder Trophy.
This one might be a little quick.
Do you want? I can start.
Yeah, go for it.
It's just two words, really. It's just Connor Bedard. I mean, you can't. It's not even an argument at this point. I think because it's something that I believe is voted on internally, right? Like it's like a and
I'm
it's
actually
like
not sure how this.
I can't remember.
I always lose track of who votes.
Because I don't. It's not NHLPA. It's not the Players Association.
The only one that I like remember who votes on it is the NHL GM's vote on the Vezina, but the other ones
I think the Selke too gets voted on possibly.
That I don't remember.
Like I think it's players. Anyways, yeah, I just feel like there's not much to say. You
not at all.
He's still being talked about, and he's not. His team didn't even make the playoffs. He's over in the Czech Republic right now, having a hell of a time.
And the time of his life.
Notching his season, or sorry, not his season, notching his tournament best. He has like 5 or 6 goals now. Like he will one day be really great. I think will continue to be great. And I think that starting off his career by winning a Calder is nothing short of like we could expect nothing less from this boy. Like really.
I totally agree. Oh, well, an interesting story about Connor Bedard and the Calder Trophy, because get the cat's out of the bag, get that out of the way. I agree with you. Connor Bedard is winning this award in his sleep. But an interesting note is I keep mentioning that preseason bracket I made, and I picked a lot of like surprise underdog picks, and a lot of them have looked good. But one of the picks that I made based a lot on betting odds, Connor Bedard was too much of a favorite to win the Calder Trophy. So I'm like, you know what? You never really know who's going to win it. Chicago's a pretty bad team. I thought Columbus was going to be a little bit improved. I picked Adam Fantilli winning the Calder Trophy in the preseason, and I really believed it. Like, I had debates with people, and people were like, why don't you have Connor Bedard winning the Calder?
He was fine, just Bedard was better.
No, but part of why I rationalized it, like, even before the season started, I was like, okay, you look at who Adam Fantilli's surrounded by when he's on that Columbus Blue Jackets power play was my main thing. I was like, oh, he's playing with Johnny Gaudreau. He's playing with Patrick Laine. He's going to be able to feast, whereas Connor Bedard has to do it all himself on that Chicago Blackhawks power play. I'm like, he's going to be good, but we can't really trust him to, lead that power play all himself. He did that and more. Like, Connor Bedard was absolutely insane this year. And here's the craziest thing, is he was injured for some of the year. Like, he only played 68 games this season and still had almost a point per game. He had 61 points in 68 games, 22 goals. He had 61 points in only 68 games.
Why were people talking about that more? Like people
more because if you had to dig a little bit to find the Chicago Blackhawks at the bottom of the ocean. But
they're at like the core of the earth. They're like beneath the lava.
Yeah, like they're maybe even on another planet, but they were terrible. But yeah. Connor Bedard was just as advertised, and he's only getting better.
Okay, so next we have the Hart Trophy. I can go first if you
I go for it.
Okay, so my pick for the Hart Trophy is, I would say, not necessarily about the player as an individual, but how they benefit their team, and also looking at what the team has to work with, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I'm going with Nathan MacKinnon. I think that Mac is probably, and I wouldn't say he's underrated, and I've made the mistake of having this argument with people, trying to be like, Nathan MacKinnon's so underrated, blah, blah, blah. I truly, truly feel, and like, I know he's won a cup. He wasn't captain when he won that cup. It was
still not captain now, obviously.
He's still not. And like, you hear stories of him, like when he played junior and when he played, like, when was it? Like, not even junior, like when he play the World Juniors too? Like, you just
he played the World Cup of Hockey.
Yeah, that's what it was. You hear stories about him and how he's like an upstanding guy. And I think that obviously this Hart Trophy is really about how many points and sort of how you benefit your team in terms of like helping win games when needed. But I really do think that Nathan MacKinnon has not necessarily gotten the recognition like Nikita Kucherov or Connor McDavid have before. So I think that at this point it could be anyone. I do think it's going to probably end up being Kucherov, but in a perfect world, in my mind, I would give it to Nathan MacKinnon. Like he is so talented and I don't think gets enough recognition for it, really. Like he's so good.
I absolutely love that pick, and I absolutely love Nathan MacKinnon. He is straight up my favorite player. He's my favorite player that does not wear a Leafs jersey. Like the way he plays, he's Nate Dogg for a reason. Like he literally, Connor McDavid speeds his way to the net. Nathan MacKinnon actually like gallops like gallops like a horse. Like he actually like puts so much power into every stride. Connor McDavid, it's like he's a ballerina. He skates nicely and he's an amazing skater. MacKinnon, the amount of force and power, it's almost like he's a snowshoer. The amount of force he puts into every movement he makes. Like, it's insane watching him play. But with all of that said, I do not have Nathan MacKinnon winning the Hart Trophy.
And I don't just, that's why I said to you, in a perfect world, I would have him win. I think he deserves it. And I think he had a stellar season.
I don't think he does, though, if you look at what I'm going to get into.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to pull up that list. Every time I talk about the list, we need to have like a ding that goes off. I'm going to start putting it in the corner of the videos because like I feel like people are going to start doubting if this list even exists. But actually on TikTok, if you look at the Jake Ottinger video from last week's episode where I put it on TikTok, I did include a screenshot of the list just to like rationalize what I was saying and show that it is a real list. It does exist.
For those at home, I have never seen this list.
Joey, go on you have a homework assignment. You have a homework assignment. After this episode, you're going to my Twitter and you're typing in like from Jared Rotenberg, like things that I've said. Type in Ottinger, and then you're gonna see every message I've had with Ottinger, and you will see the list.
I do believe it's there. I'm just saying we literally have a podcast together, and I have never seen this list.
Do I gotta pull it up on my phone right now? Because I will do so.
I want to be as transparent. Hey, we're about honesty and transparency here, and I'm just being
valid. Here's the list.
Yeah, I believe it now. I'm sorry, I just actually had.
And if you look right here at who I have winning the Hart Trophy, I made this on October 10th of 2023. I picked, a lot of people had the McDavid pick. A lot of people had other picks. I said the Tampa Bay Lightning are winning are going to be a better team than they should be on paper. And my reason for that is because Nikita Kucherov is back. Nikita Kucherov is about to have a dog of a season. And if you look at the fact that he won the Art Ross, like he led the entire NHL in points. Look at the person who was second place in points on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Braden Point had 90 points. Nikita Kucherov had 144. He was arms and legs ahead of the next best scorer on the Tampa Bay Lightning on a team that only finished as a wildcard team. But I think about how the actual award is named. It's not league MVP. It's not the same as how the NBA does their MVP trophy. It specifically says the player deemed most valuable to their team. Nikita Kucherov is the most valuable to his team. This team made the playoffs, and without Nikita Kucherov, there's no telling where they would be, but it probably would have been a little bit more down in that hole with Chicago. They are not a deep team. They significantly lack that depth that they had when they were winning the Stanley Cups back in the day. But Nikita Kucherov, back to pulling blood from a stone. He pulled blood from a stone in order to make them a playoff team. By definition, he is the player most valuable to his team. Kucherov's winning the Hart Trophy.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's why I made my little side comment before you even went off on your rant. Because I was like, I do think it's probably going to end up being him, but also just love Nathan MacKinnon and wish he would win. Okay, we're going to the Norris.
Update. While I went off on that tangent, I accidentally threw my water bottle off my desk, so I'm going to go pick that up. One moment. Hands were going crazy. I was getting excited, and I knocked that water bottle right off my desk.
Okay, we're going for the Norris now. Jared, it actually doesn't say your pick on here, but
I did not have a good. Well, honestly, I didn't have a bad preseason pick, but it's not one of the nominees. That's why it's not there.
So the three nominees.
For reference, I had Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman was my preseason Norris pick, and he actually had a bounce back year. Like he was in top 5 in defensive scoring. So I'm not going to say it aged badly, but he wasn't a nominee for defense.
It didn't age like fine wine should.
It didn't age like some of the other ones have.
Um, but the three that were nominated are Quinn Hughes, Roman Yossi, and Cale Makar. Oh, might I add, two out of the three players that, well, actually, I would say three now because I really do like Vancouver. But I would say all of them are like some of my favorite defensemen in the league. I
They're
guess
so good.
they are for a reason. Like genuinely, I think this might be one of the hardest categories simply because of the fact that all three defensemen are really good. All three defensemen helped carry their teams in the regular season to bring them to playoff appearances. Like we talked about Nashville. We didn't know necessarily at the beginning of the year if they were going to make it, and they did. Same with Vancouver. And then obviously Cale Makar is just like probably one of the best defensemen ever. So like that's not even, you can't even question that. But I think for my pick, I'm gonna probably go with Quinn Hughes. He's really good. I mean, you can't base it all on a guy being good, but I think that without Quinn Hughes being on that Vancouver team this year, I don't think they A would have gone as deep, or B may have had a bit more trouble getting themselves into a playoff position. So I really do think, and on top of that, Hughes has as we talked about, Vancouver's locker room really lacked the leadership and was a bit of a hot mess last year. And I think that he is younger than some of the veterans on the team. Like Quinn Hughes is, how old is he now? When was he drafted? Was he drafted
Drafted in
2017?
2018.
2018. Okay, so like he's like relatively young guy. Like he's 3 years younger than like a guy like McDavid, who's also the captain of his team at the moment, but he also became the captain relatively early too. But my point is I just think that Quinn Hughes, like really when you look at it, a team that was not that cohesive has suddenly fallen into really good like morale and really good leadership. And also like all the guys on the team kind of seem like they vouch for each other, which I really like. And I think Quinn Hughes is probably one of the guys that you could say that's like the main reason for. In terms of actually defensive play, which I was going to talk about, like Quinn Hughes is so good at like poke checking the puck and getting like good turnovers. Like I don't know, I think his stick handling skills are so superb. I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's like his asset, but as someone who watched the last series, watched Vancouver this year, that's my pick. It's definitely Quinn Hughes.
100%. Like Quinn Hughes, I feel like going into the season really had a reputation for being a good puck mover and being a good offensive defenseman. This year, he proved himself as one of the best overall defensemen in the entire NHL. And I'm going with the exact same pick that you have. Now, I think there's a rational argument for picking Cale Makar. Cale Makar had
Oh, he's so
slightly
good.
less
He's so
points
good.
in less games. So he had 2 less points, but I think in like quite a few less games. So I actually think if I were to be awarding this, I probably would. It would be hard not to pick Cale Makar because Cale Makar is absolutely incredible and he had just around the same amount of points in less games. But I actually, while you were talking, went ahead and looked up who actually votes on this award. And it's voted on by the Hockey Writers Association. It is going to be Quinn Hughes. Cale Makar, because they like storylines.
They've been rooting for him, and the hockey world's been rooting for this kid. Like he's really 100%. Good.
And Cale Makar has already won a Norris Trophy, and he will win one again. Like, believe me, in his career, he will have more than just one Norris Trophy. But Quinn Hughes had a major breakout year, and that's not a breakout year in the sense that he was bad before, but he already had some believers heading into the year for his offensive ability. But this year, he proved the naysayers wrong. He's not just an offensive guy. He's one of the greatest all-around defenders in the entire league. And the Hockey Writers Association wants new people winning awards because it's more interesting. If there's more people year after year that are in the running for these awards, then it becomes less predictable. Quinn Hughes is going to win this award. It's his award to lose. He was leading the defensive point race all season long. By the end of the year, it actually got pretty close where, Cale Makar kind of made it more interesting than I think it needed to be. Like, Cale Makar pulled ahead and actually
of course, you can't expect anything less from him. He's so good. Of
course, but it looked like Quinn Hughes is gonna like lead points for defensemen in his sleep. It didn't end up being in his sleep. He only led by 2 by the end of the year. If there was an extra 2 or 3 games in the regular season, like there's no telling what would have happened. But Quinn Hughes is winning this award. He was so good. He proved a lot of people wrong. The storyline is just so perfect for him as a first-year captain. He is winning the Norris Trophy this year.
We got a little We got a little update here. Just it's still scoreless.
0-0 action.
0 action. Some hits though, looks like. Florida's out hitting them at the moment. Just thought I'd give that update. Okay, we're gonna move on. This award, I feel like Jared and I are both really excited about because it's actually like one of our probably favorite players in the mix. But I would say the other two guys all. Guys, he's all right. Okay, we're moving on.
He's okay. He's whatever. Overrated in my opinion.
Scored 69 goals.
Overrated in my opinion.
So we're gonna talk about the Ted Lindsay. The 3 nominees are, without a doubt, this is like I think probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to decide on in my life. Not to be over dramatic, but it's Kucherov, McKinnon, and Matthews. They all had crazy, ridiculously good career high in some way or another seasons. So you have Austin Matthews just shy of 70, but also like had the most career goals in the modern era, like since Ovechkin. So, I mean, it's for any guy to do that, especially
he beat, if I'm not mistaken, I think he beat Ovechkin's record for most goals in a season.
He did, yeah. But to do it in this era of hockey, to do it but the way hockey is now, how much I don't necessarily know if it's harder because I think the game has changed a lot, but to do that in this day and age is so hard. Like ridiculous. I wish he had made 70. I mean, 69 is
everyone was waiting for that.
One could also argue I think Kucherov had a huge year. I mean, I'm wearing a Leafs hat. I think I'm going Austin Matthews on this one. He's won the Ted Lindsay before, I'm pretty sure. I think he's won it once. And
I believe yes. In the year that he won the Hart, he also won the Ted Lindsay.
Yeah, the year he got 60.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could, and then, but again, I think it's player that's the biggest asset. I think literally in terms of a vote, it would come down to like 1 vote difference between Kucherov and Matthews. Like I'd be very interested to see who pulls ahead in that. But Jared, it's your turn. I mean, the ball's in your court now.
Well, I obviously have Kucherov winning the Hart Trophy because by definition, the player deemed most valuable to his team, that has Nikita Kucherov's name written all over it. But if you look at this, it's not just who's the best or most valuable to their team. It's who do their peers believe is the best player, had the most impressive season. It's Austin Matthews. If you look at what the peers are looking at when they're talking about who they're most impressed by, yes, having a lot of assists is cool, having a lot of points is cool, but if you are sniping the daylights out on a nightly basis, on every single opponent, if you're unstoppable, if you're having multiple hat tricks, multiple double goal games, you are the most impressive player. You are the player that everyone is blown away by. You are the player who is judged as the most outstanding in the regular season. Nathan McKinnon had an amazing season. Nikita Kucherov had an amazing season, but none of them were in the conversation to break a modern day goals record. That is just simply unheard of. Austin Matthews is winning the Ted Lindsay.
Easy.
Go Leafs, go. Austin Matthews is winning that award.
Yeah. Okay, finally. And this one I have kind of 2 picks for, which is kind of stupid and not really loud, but whatever.
One.
This is the
I'm kidding. Make your pick.
This is the Vezina, so goaltender of the year, and the nominees are Sergei Bobrovsky, Thatcher Demko, and Connor Hellebuyck. And mine would definitely be between Demko and Hellebuyck, just because like every time anyone ever brought up goaltending all year and every podcast I listened to, it was literally just talk of these two, regardless of how their team was doing, regardless of if they were literally, if the end of the score in regulation was 1-0 or 1-1, it was simply the fact that the goalies were able to shut the other teams down. And I don't know, just both of them are so talented. I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be Demko, just because we kind of saw a collapse in the playoffs of.
But it's a regular season award.
Okay, fine.
No, go with your pick. We'll all
no. Well, my argument was just going to be the first round upset. So then,
I don't think they
because
regular playoffs rather.
Yeah, okay, because it was so disappointing. Because before, I would definitely say Hellebuyck without a doubt in my mind, like easily. I would pick.
Okay,
But
so
after the collapse of round one, then I would say sort of differently. But we're talking about regular season. I agree with you. So I'm going with Hellebuyck for my pick as well.
I was about to debate you. We were about to have a big disagreement here because Connor Hellebuyck is winning the Vezina. Connor Hellebuyck is winning the Vezina in his sleep, in my opinion, and I think a major factor for that. Yes, the analytics and all that stuff, even basic analytics like save percentage and goals against average, and I can pull those up in a moment. But those go on the side of Connor Hellebuyck. But you also have to consider who's grading this award. It isn't the analytics guys that are grading this award. It's not the hockey writers. It's not whatever. It's the GMs that are doing it. I swear sometimes with this award, they simply go, okay, well, think about it. It's the NHL GMs. It's a bunch of old white men that look up, okay, who had the most wins? Okay, him? Yep, he's winning the best goalie. Because in fairness, they are honestly doing it right. They're doing it right for the wrong reason. You should look at a whole bunch of different things in order to who scored. Kachuk, that's the Conn Smythe guy. Back to what I was saying. Okay, here's the thing with NHL GMs. They almost make the right decision for the wrong reason, where you should factor in a whole bunch of things when you're making a decision, like who is the best goalie overall. But they almost take out the fluff. They ask the very important question, okay, who's going to get me the most wins? Okay, Connor Hellebuyck? Okay, he's the guy. Connor Hellebuyck doesn't have many more wins than the other guys. Like it's a difference of two.
But it's the saves and it's the overall gameplay where you just are blown away every time he's in the net. Like it just is.
But what I'm saying is, even though, yes, I agree with you, he's better analytically and statistically than these other guys. But even if you want to take out all of that,
yeah, no, exactly. I'm saying, yeah.
Like Connor Hellebuyck has the wins lead with 37. He's one behind Georgiev, but obviously Georgiev isn't winning this award because when you're an extremely bad goalie with other stats, that's when maybe they'll look a little bit more into, okay, maybe we should nominate you for the best goalie of the year. But as long as it's like a conversation, Connor Hellebuyck is the guy. The one thing I will say is that even though Thatcher Demko is only 2 wins behind, he also, based on injury, did have a lot less games played. Like he played 9 less games and only had 2 less losses. So it is something to look at. But then again, the Vancouver Canucks were pretty similar to the Winnipeg Jets all season long. Connor Hellebuyck, I think, shut the door at the end of the day. He had a better goals against average and save percentage than Thatcher Demko, even though it's not by much. Like Connor Hellebuyck had a save percentage of a 9.29. Thatcher Demko had a 9.18. Not much of a difference. Looking over at goals against average, it was a difference of Connor Hellebuyck having a 2.39 goals against average compared to a 2.45. So it really is grasping at straws. But at the end of the day, when you're deciding an award like this out of the top 3, you do have to grasp at straws. Like you are comparing the best to the best. It's a very minimal difference between them. But with the fact that Connor Hellebuyck,
this is one of the hardest too. This award,
for sure is. It really is one of the hardest. But with the fact that Connor Hellebuyck has better advanced stats and also has more wins, it's Connor Hellebuyck.
I think so too. Okay, we're gonna move to our last little segment, and there was also one other thing I want to talk about. But first of all, the Leafs have a new head coach. Really, like it's a tiny little itty bitty micro-sized glimpse of hope. It's really not that big, but it's there and it's growing, and it makes me have hope for next year.
I think it's bigger than some people give it credit for. It's a change from the bench boss. It is a change in overall identity.
Agreed, but every time I let myself do that for this team, this goddamn organization,
Babcock
takes a phone book and slaps me across the face with it. So I mean, but I think it'll be I do. That's why I said it's growing. Like yeah. But anyway, so they hired Craig Berube last week was hired. Super exciting. We kind of all saw it coming. It was kind of in talks for a little while, and then the news broke midway through the week last week. I want to say I think it was like Friday.
I believe it was Friday. Yeah.
And then yesterday was the opening, or was it? Yeah, it was yesterday. It was the opening press conference where he got his jersey, and Shanahan and Tree Living spoke on him about him. And it actually seemed like a super positive vibe, in my opinion. Like I was watching some of it. I mean, Berube is very. and I would say you could compare him to the teddy bear Sheldon Keefe we saw who walked on the podium his first day. Was a lot different than the Sheldon Keefe we saw before he was fired. He had a bit more of a fire under his ass, and also was just like a bit more grumpy, I think. But Berube's he's here to get things done. Like you can tell he has that
He's
fire
here for
lit under
business.
him. Yeah, he's here. He's here on it's a business trip that's gonna be turned into a him being here for a while. So hopefully.
The thing is, though, when you compare Craig Berube to Sheldon Keefe, and we're going to get into more about Sheldon Keefe after, because there's another bit of Sheldon Keefe news, but we'll hold that for a moment. What's interesting, if you compare the way that Craig Berube well, he hasn't really started his tenure with the Leafs, he just got hired, but the way he kind of has been introduced to the fan base and to the media, Craig Berube versus Sheldon Keefe. Sheldon Keefe was portrayed as a teddy bear, and then just based on, what the Leafs do to a person, he became more grumpy. But he is still, like, at the end of the day, Sheldon Keefe, you saw it in that, when he got fired, like that
was my favorite. That was my favorite firing video I think I've ever.
It was such a nice video, but it almost showed again Sheldon Keefe's true colors. He tried to put on a grumpy face when his nice guy attitude wasn't working. But at the end of the day, you can mask it. You can't fully hide who you were. At the end of the day, Sheldon Keefe came in to be the nice guy after Mike Babcock got fired. Eventually realized,
the Leafs needed it though. The Leafs they
needed the pick me up, but at some point it became okay. He tried to be the nice guy after Babcock, then eventually learned, okay, maybe Babcock was on to something, not to the level Babcock took it, but maybe this team does need a bit of a tush whooping at some point. He tried to play that role, and that role didn't work so well. And then at the end, it was almost like he was at a loss for words, and he's like, I don't even know what more to do.
Yeah.
Craig Berube is putting on a nice face now to the media. But you've seen enough clips of how he is behind that bench of the St. Louis Blues, especially that helped them win a Stanley Cup. He is way more serious and way more all business than Sheldon Keefe, even with his grumpy pants on, ever has any business being. Sheldon Keefe puts on the face as a grumpy guy. Craig Berube is a grump, but in the best way possible. Not in the Babcock way where he's a total asshole and he's actually like a threat to society. Craig Berube is a serious, he's a dog, he's an animal, he gets the guys fired up.
He's gonna be the not so secret weapon.
Exactly. I really think he's gonna be a big factor for this team. He's not gonna do things that cross the line, but from a pure hockey standpoint, he's a hard ass. He will get the most
out
of this. We keep going back to this line. I don't know what it was when it was mentioned in the meeting today, but he is going to drag blood from a stone.
From the stone, easily.
I really think he is. I think he's going to be a
He's actually going to, he's going to draw it from like the molten lava rocks that you find like at the Earth's core.
Yep. Like whatever it needs to be, it needs
to be. The stone of stone.
Now, one thing I'll say with Craig Berube that I'm not going to say it worries me, but I know I've had conversations with some of my friends in Leafs land that have brought up this point, and it's an interesting conversation, so I want to pose it here. I actually disagreed with this point, and I'm going to explain why. But one of the things that it wasn't even when Craig Berube was officially hired, but again, it was the not so secret. It was floating around there. Everyone kind of knew it was going to happen.
It was like, but it was weird. It was like the next day, his name just got thrown. Someone just randomly tweeted about it, and then everyone knew.
Because I feel like even last year when the Leafs lost to the like I don't mean last year as in this year because it's already technically last year. I mean against the Florida Panthers in 2023, which how sad is that to say? People when Sheldon Keefe got
in the second round, sorry,
people when people wanted Sheldon Keefe fired after that second round series. I was one of them. I really wanted Sheldon Keefe gone.
Oh, me
people
too.
Were talking about how Craig Berube
I for sure have photos from my private story where I was like probably just saying like things about him for sure.
Yeah. Well, people already were talking about how they wanted Sheldon Keefe gone. And Craig Berube in St. Louis, it was the first year of St. Louis not making the playoffs in a while.
Yeah.
And
they had really just won a cup a few years before.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, your victory parade only lasts so long. It was the year after the St. Louis Blues didn't make the playoffs. Like, they obviously made it to the second round in 2022, lost to Colorado. But then they didn't make it in 2023. But it's not just that they didn't make it. Like, they were bad. They were bad. And already people started throwing out there, what if Craig Berube is fired? And so I feel like the connection was already there. If Sheldon Keefe is fired and if Craig Berube is fired, this might be a perfect match. And it didn't end up happening. But now that both
Yeah.
guys were fired at the end of the season, it was kind of like people already were like, oh, well, we talked about this last year. Maybe it's a year later and it's going to work out. But here's the thing with that. What I wanted to bring up that people have mentioned to me that I don't necessarily agree, but I do think it's an interesting conversation, is one of their main concerns with Craig Berube is how badly things ended with the St. Louis. It's like, and my retort to that, my response to that is, well, can you think of a situation where a head coach gets fired where it ends well? Like, it always ends kind of rocky. So that's kind of what I said to, dispel a little bit of that narrative. But it is something to think of. He did really lose that room in pretty quick
Fashion.
pretty quick fashion. Something to think about, something to ponder on. So it's not all good things. There is something to think. There's something to say about the fact that it didn't go that well by the end with St. Louis. But then again, he also won them a Stanley Cup.
I mean, as a fan, I feel like it's good to like we have the teams. It's funny. I talk about them as if I know them, and I don't. I wish I did, but we have the team's best interest at heart. Like, truly, as a fan, if you're giving your 100 to a fan base or to a team as a fan, yeah, like there's those eyebrows that go up or concerns that are raised, like, they are valid. We know that after what our team went through about, I want to say, like 5 years ago, when the whole demise.
Sorry, which one? I'm just checking the list of Game 7 defeats and embarrassments.
Yeah, but also I'm just saying, like, Mike Babcock and what he did to the team, and what he did to morale.
Marner, yeah.
What he did, like, and it wasn't only Marner. He would literally, like, put guys in the doghouse for weeks at a time. And, like,
well, you even look at how he did, like, Game 7s back in 2018. It was like an option of putting this young superstar in Austin Matthews out on the ice, but he's like, no, I have my way. I have my, good players. I have my system there. And Patrick Marleau's getting the nod in the final 3 minutes of Game 7. Like, why?
But anyways, I think that because I think the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years have been a little rough. There was a Randy Carlyle era. Like, I feel like they haven't had I think in the beginning with Babcock, we thought he was a solid anchor, but I think that was lost very quickly once all this other stuff came out. And then eventually, so sorry, that's just my alarm. Once all this other stuff came out. But on that note, Sheldon Keefe was hired about 3 or 4 hours ago by the New Jersey Devils. Let's talk about it real quick.
It's interesting. I actually think he's going to have a lot of success there. And an interesting thing that they were talking about on the Steve Dangle podcast. I'm a big Steve Dangle podcast. There's 2 things I'm going to mention a lot on this podcast. It's my list and my predictions. I love bringing up receipts. Whether it's my picks or don't worry, Joey. I'm gonna remember some picks that
next year we're gonna, I think we'll do a combined pick.
100%. I love pulling up receipts. So there's 2 things I'm gonna mention a lot. It's pulling up those receipts. Love pulling up some receipts. I'm kind of forgetting what my first thing was. Hold on. There was 2 things that I bring up a lot.
It's Steve Dangle podcast.
Steve Dangle podcast. That's it. Hold on. It's pulling up receipts and the Steve Dangle podcast. Love the Steve Dangle podcast. And one thing they were mentioning is they were looking through track records of how well coaches do on their second NHL team. Sheldon Keefe might go fuck around and win a Stanley Cup with the New Jersey Devils.
Every comment today on TSN's post was literally, he's gonna go and win a cup.
No, but not people are saying that because they hate the Leafs and they know what tends to happen when people leave the Leafs. The Leafs.
There were some people with good arguments though. Like,
no, but if you look at how coaches tend to fare with their second team, like, it's night and day. Like, coaches do not win a Stanley Cup with their first team. It's almost exclusively they win a cup with their second team, which unfortunately kind of gets rid of the Craig Berube winning a cup in Toronto argument. This is his third team. But
third time's a charm.
I hope so. But anyway, so not only does he have that going his way, that potentially, Sheldon Keefe, he's learned his lesson with Toronto and is going to know what to do coming forward with the New Jersey Devils. I will also stand by Sheldon Keefe deserved to be fired. I would argue he got fired a year after he deserved to be fired.
Oh,
in 2023.
Easily.
And you could even make the argument that after the Habs series, he could have been one of the guys. Now, that would have been a bit That would have been a bit ridiculous because it was only his second full year behind the bench. And even that wasn't a full year because it was a COVID year. But you could have made the argument. Anyways, he should have been fired. He deserved to be fired. And the reason he deserved to be fired isn't because he didn't recognize the issue. It's because he very clearly recognized the issue. But at some point, the message wasn't being received. The message wasn't being received. But my point being, even though, yes, he couldn't get that message to be, inflicted into the Leafs, he knew the issue. He's a smart guy. He is not a dumb coach. And I genuinely believe that some of his system, some of the way he plays, he was a worthy guy that, needed to kick the can in order to, change the Leafs' identity. But he is going to bring a lot of good to the New Jersey Devils, a team that needs a lot going their way after what happened with Lindy Ruff. I think he's going to be a really good guy for the New Jersey Devils. I really like that fit there. I think the Devils are another one of those offensive-minded teams, which seem to be Sheldon Keefe's bread and butter.
They have so much talent on that team.
They really do, and their defensive core isn't great right now, but it's getting so much better with Simone Nemec showing so much promise. Dougie Hamilton's still really good when healthy. Of course, Luke Hughes was a nominee for the Calder Trophy. We didn't mention him earlier. They have such a good defensive core building, so it's almost like even though maybe right now they aren't the best defensively, they're trending towards in the next few years being a way more well-rounded team, especially comparing them to the Leafs. And I think Sheldon Keefe has a lot of weapons now to work with, and I think he's going to do really well with the New Jersey Devils. I really like this fit.
Okay, so the last point, and this was something that took up almost the entire day at work yesterday. We were talking about the whole day.
Okay.
So our dear friend at Bar Down, Jesse Pollock, posted a video that went somewhat viral, I think, on TikTok and on our Instagram as well, I believe. But it was basically regarding a certain trade that happened yesterday. Ryan McDonagh went back after taking a little hiatus in the fun city of Nashville.
Cap retained.
Yeah, back to his former team. And he won cups with them. So I mean, he's also a dog. He's been through it. He knows all the guys on that team. So really, it makes you scratch your head a little bit. I mean, Nashville, we know, is probably going to blow themselves up right now, but Jesse
blow themselves up to build back up. They have like 25 million in cap spaces.
So now, what are they going to do with all that cap space? Which team is probably the most poorly managed cap space team in the entire league? I don't know. Maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs. Who needs to be who is a player that is likely the kind of guy that you can get rid of right now? He has a name, and I love him, and I'm not riding the hate him train, but Jesse said yesterday that he thinks that Mitch Marner goes to Nashville and Steven Stamkos comes over from Tampa Bay to play with John Tavares, takes a team-friendly deal, and the two that have played together since they were 10 years old play together in the National Hockey League, which they've never done before. I don't think this is likely. I don't think this is necessarily going to happen. However, just the stars are aligning a little bit. Jared, do you have anything you want to say about that?
I said it when we were discussing the off-season episode, that Leaf-centric episode. I still do not think Mitch Marner is waiving his no-move clause.
I don't think he's going to. I
really don't think he's going to. And to be honest, again, people keep bringing up, the Leafs are just going to, if he doesn't want to waive it, fine. He's not playing a single game. He's riding the pine. He's sitting in the press box. The Leafs had a chance to trade him when he did not have a no-move clause. Kyle Dubas, in his final press conference with the Leafs, mentioned that he wanted to start thinking about moving someone because now was the time. 2023 was the summer to do it. And what happened? Brendan Shanahan said, nope, not doing it. Bye, Kyle, for even bringing it up. Bye, Kyle. Brendan Shanahan made his bed, and now he needs to sleep in it. If you didn't trade him now, you can't just turn around and say, okay, fine, then I made a mistake, and I'm going to make it his problem. Doesn't work like that. You negotiated a deal, or rather, you had a chance. It was negotiated in his deal with Kyle Dubas that Mitch Marner, as of the 2024 summer, was going to have the chance to kind of dictate his future. That was negotiated with him and agreed upon with him. Brandon Shanahan, as the guy that had full knowledge of that contract, you knew what you could have done in order to avoid this player having you by the gall, is you could have traded him before that no move clause kicked in. He chose not to. Now, if Mitch Marner wants to waive his no move clause in order to go with his new wife and probably go start a family in Nashville, Tennessee, he can and he has that right. But you cannot force him to. And to be honest, I don't think he's going to. And
That'll
it
be
actually
such a
makes me
bad.
so frustrated that we didn't trade him when we had the chance. And I don't want Marner gone. But if now you're going to talk about, well, maybe we should have traded him. Well, you should have traded him when you had the chance. Now it's done. You've missed.
It'll be such a bad look on the. If Shanahan tried to pull that, I would literally say that the Toronto fans need to like unionize and just throw him out of his office. Like I don't
Maybe.
know.
And like a lot of Toronto, well, a lot of, not Toronto fans, a lot of like Toronto fans' uncles seem to believe that, yeah, I don't want to see him play a single game, stick him to the press box. That worked maybe in the 80s or 90s.
But also, and that was, and my argument, I remember we literally had this discussion, was how you're really going to take a guy like Marner, who's done so much for the team, good guy, been through it, had his fair share of like issues where actually like things were not fair for him as a player. Like he was not set up for success, not on his own accord, but because of a coach who was stupid. And
like an actual bully.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So in my opinion, like, do you really want to suffer burning that bridge just to bring Steven Stamkos over here to play with John Tavares, who's kind of a washed up captain and hasn't really done a lot this year? I don't know. Is that the kick? Is that the kick he needs? I don't know. They've never played together except for when they won golds and won World Juniors and that kind of stuff. So
that's the second part of the debate. Like I didn't even get into that, but yes, I'm going to get into that right now. I don't think Mitch Marner is leaving Toronto, like, period. Doesn't mean to Nashville, doesn't mean to Tampa, doesn't mean to any. I don't believe he's going anywhere. I believe he will be a Maple Leaf come next fall. Steven Stamkos, I believe, will be moved from the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't believe he's coming to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh. I do not believe he's coming to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think it's going to end up being low-key. A team like Nashville is an option. They have the cap space. They seem to be trending towards almost building in free agency. They do not seem to have the patience of wanting to build through the draft and build how most teams do. They want to add more Ryan O'Reillys and Luke Schentz. Why not add another veteran in Steven Stamkos to give them, I'd say, the deepest, probably oldest, most veteran-heavy team in the entire NHL that's built purely through free agency? That is a possibility. I even think the team that I honestly think it's going to be, I think Minnesota's the team. I think Minnesota has the cap space, and Minnesota is looking for another centerman. Like, they have Eriksson Ek, who's a really good first-line center. They have Kirill Kaprizov, who's one of the best wingers in the entire NHL.
He's so good.
But they don't have that much depth. They have a lot of young players like Matthew Boldy and Marco Rossi. Why not have a legend and an absolute veteran, one of the best veterans in the league to learn from, than a guy like Steven Stamkos? I think those are my two teams. I think it's Nashville and I think it's Minnesota. The Leafs have a lot that they want to do. I don't think it's Steven Stamkos.
The only way it could happen, though, in my opinion, is you wait until Tavares' deal is up, and then you let the two of them play together, and they are forced to take team-friendly deals.
But I feel like when people are talking with the Stamkos thing, they're kind of projecting like what's going to happen this year. Sure, maybe 2-3 years.
I think a few years down the line, it's more likely than this year for this team.
This year it's not happening, though, especially while Tavares still makes $11 million. Don't even think about adding another aging veteran.
He's also not worth 11 million. I'm so sorry, John. You're just not.
And like, you're going to add another guy that's also, I'm not going to say washed. Stamkos is still a really good player, but Stamkos is
he's not as washed up as, yeah.
But the thing is, what I'll say is Tavares' playing style, he was never the skill guy. He was always the smart, methodical guy. And I actually would argue, we could get into this debate right now just because he got brought up. I don't think Tavares is as washed as people say. Tavares is still consistently.
I don't think so either. I think.
And he isn't speedy. He's always slow. Maybe you shouldn't put him out in 3-on-3 overtime. That's a coaching decision. We'll see how Craig Berube utilizes him. I agree that he could be utilized differently. But John Tavares is still at his age. He's not fast right now, but he's never been fast. But he is really smart. He's really good at taking faceoffs. He hasn't weakened on his skill sets that he has always had when he was younger. He still has a hell of a wrist shot. He's still incredibly smart out there. He reads the game like nobody else. Like, I look at, there's the Crosby molded player and there's the Connor McDavid molded player. Connor McDavid is certainly more flashy and skill-based and speed-based, but Sidney Crosby reads the game like nobody's business. And yes, John Tavares may not be as skilled as Sidney Crosby, but if I'm comparing what mold of player he's in, he's definitely more on that Sidney Crosby mold of player. So I would argue he's actually not as washed as people say. Regardless, his role does need to be modified.
And I think he loses the C. Like, I think
that's a given. We were talking about that before. Matthews needs the C.
Matthews needs the C. And in addition to that, Tavares, I feel bad for him because I think I don't think he has social anxiety necessarily, but he has a lot of trouble in press conferences. Yeah, like he has a lot of trouble.
I think he's awkward and quiet. I think he's a non-vocal leader. He leads by example.
Yeah. So, but you notice, like, even there's little things, like he'll just be like, yeah, we have a lot to learn, but then not talk about how, like, with him, I feel like there's just very like words, and then he doesn't like give enough to back it up. I will say though, like, there was a time when I think he was what the Leafs needed in a captain. However, I think that right now they need a Matthews. They need
a vocal guy. Matthews,
they need a guy
kind of shy too, but he is so.
He really came out of his own.
He really did. Crazy. He came out of his shell so much.
It's good. Like, it's kind of nice though to see a guy that's that talented, but also like a good leader. Like, I feel like if they're like an asshole and they're talented, like, it's harder to root for them.
I agree. And this Leafs team and in the media and the fan base, we're a bit tired of the lead by example. We want a personality. We want a guy that rallies the troops and rallies the team. And like, yes, obviously there are bad examples around the league of guys that are really skilled and have the C purely for their skill, but not for their actual playing style. Connor McDavid's an example. He's super skilled, but he's not a very vocal leader. And certain teams are fine with that because they have other players within the organization that are more outgoing. At this point, though, the Leafs have tried it and failed with the non-vocal leader. They need that vocal leader.
And in my opinion, I think like this is so embarrassing. Like Dion Phaneuf was, I'm pretty sure, who's the captain before him? After him, Phil Kessel?
No, it went Dion Phaneuf.
There wasn't one
strip to John Tavares. Unless I'm missing.
Yeah, like that's
not no captain for
that's not a great look. Like there's okay. I thought I was going crazy for a second, but then I realized that they were captainless. There's a couple teams, but I feel like an organization like the Leafs, the kind of guys you have, and you have the potential to put the C on their chest, you're not putting it on Tavares, you're putting it on Matthews. Ultimately.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm in agreement with you.
And
anyways,
kind of to wrap up the point there, Steven Stamkos is a great player, but Toronto isn't the fit. I don't think that's happening. We already have
3 years. Give it 3 years.
Maybe. And I mean, I don't know what's his current contract situation. When is he expiring in 3 years?
I'm pretty sure.
I think this summer. I think
what's his cap hit right now?
Well, no, the reason that everyone
that was why though.
I think he's a free agent this summer because that's the reason for the narrative is that last summer, all summer long, he was saying, I want to come into to the preseason already with a contract signed. And apparently, like, the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't even call him. Like, they didn't even try to make a deal with their captain. That's where the relationship soured. I'm pretty sure he's a free agent this summer now. I think they had a chance to extend him last July 1st. Now they have a risk of losing him. And that's why there's the risk of him potentially going. But Toronto isn't the team. We're not going to have the cap space to acquire another aging veteran. We just don't. I think it's going to be a Minnesota or a Nashville. And to be totally honest, like maybe he signs a short-term deal with the intention of retiring as a Leaf. But that's still to be seen. I'd probably predict he signs like a 3-4 year deal.
Yeah.
And at his age,
where he's making like decent money. Because he's still worth that as a player. Like
he's probably worth, call it like a 5x4 or something. Like 4 years by $5 million. Something like that.
Yeah.
But to be honest, like 4 or 5 years probably takes him to the end of his contract. Like I don't see him signing like a 1-year bridge deal. Like he's out of that point. He wants to make his money for the rest of his career.
I don't know. To come home.
Like maybe that'll be for the end of his career, but again, that's still like he's probably gonna sign another contract here that'll probably take him to at least the final season of his NHL tenure. And then maybe we talk about that in a few years if he wants to sign 1 year with the Leafs. But that's, in my opinion, way down the line. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. And Jesse, I love the thought of that trade.
It was a cool. I just think it's too soon. If
it was a little bit too good to be true, a lot would have to go right. And it starts with Mitch Marner would have to waive that no move, which I just don't see happening. And even
And I
then,
don't think, and like we said, we're on the Marner train. We don't think he should be forced. He's been through enough.
yeah,
Just
if he wants to, if he wants a change of scenery, which to be totally honest, I mean, if I was in his shoes and I'm not in his shoes, and obviously there's more factors than just the ice hockey part. He has to think about where he wants to raise his family and where his family is and whatever. But at the end of the day, like, unless he wants to leave Toronto, he doesn't have to leave Toronto. That ball is in his court because he negotiated to have it in his court. You agreed to that deal, and now you're going, wait, did I do it? Did I do that? I want any takebacks, any trade backs? Like, no. When you sign a contract, when you put pen to paper, you don't get a walksy backsy on that contract. You don't just get to say, oh wait, but I didn't want to give him a no move clause. Like, no, he had a no move clause. You knew it kicked in this summer, meaning you had the chance to trade him before that no move clause kicked in last summer, and you made the choice not to. You made your bed. Go to sleep in it, Brendan Shanahan.
Agreed. I'm frustrated with him as well. But anyways, we're gonna start to just wrap up here. Yeah, it should be the game is still 1-0 right now for Florida. So it should be an interesting series, and it should be an interesting round. We're gonna probably come back next week, hopefully in person, where like, believe it or not, Jared and I have like actually never met in person, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you guys are enjoying the content. And Jared he mentioned it on his own personal account. I'm going to let him give his spiel about our socials and that kind of stuff just really quickly before we wrap up. Do you know what spiel I'm referencing?
I have no, what do you mean? Oh, like the video where I just said that was an announcement for this. I was telling people on TikTok about this.
Okay, but I want to tell the people on YouTube how they can access our stuff.
Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do all that. But what I wanted to say is, I feel like if they've already been watching 2 hours of the podcast, I was figuring they already knew that, but my bad. So I did not actually get what you were referencing. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. We were not on the same wavelength there.
No.
Yes, you're obviously accessing the IceBergs right now on YouTube, but if you want to go check us out on our other social medias, on Instagram, it is... What is the Instagram? Hold on. I have to have these on hand. I did not know we were doing this. IceBergs. Oh my God. I do not remember what our Instagram is. Let me look it up on my phone. Okay. Coincidentally, we just got a follow from Chris Scott. So if you're Chris Scott, shout out because you just got it so our name popped up. IceBergs_hockey podcast on Instagram. You can go ahead and find us. And then on TikTok, it's a little bit easier. I don't need to think about a different name because it literally is the exact same name as you have on YouTube. The IceBergs Hockey Podcast is the full name. Search that up and you'll go ahead and find us on TikTok. So we'll be posting all kinds of little clips, all kinds of news, updates, posts even about what our topics are, when we're recording. So if you want to be in the know about all kinds of different stuff that's happening with the IceBergs Hockey Podcast, follow up on all of those social media platforms. And with that being said, I've been Jared Rotenberg. You've been with Joey Rittenberg. Joey, unless you have anything else to wrap up with, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. We'll see you soon.